Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second edition of the Davis Duo Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for listening to our first edition. Yeah, great feedback. We love our fans. That's why we do this. I'm your host, Ruspin. I am joined with my co-host, Kev. Kev, how you doing today, bud?
We're rocking and rolling. Let's get moving.
Kev, how many days away are we from D-Day, from Draft Day? How many days away are we?
We are 44 days away from draft day. Again, we draft on that last possible weekend, that Labor Day weekend, before the football season starts.
God, I love it. 44 days is so close you can taste it. Kevin and I are a huge proponent of always having your draft days as late as possible. And here is a big reason why. First segment of the day is a news segment called the Duo News. First piece of information from the Duo News I want to start with, Kev, is yesterday it was reported that Cam Akers, the starting running back for the Los Angeles Rams, ruptured his Achilles in a training accident. Kev, we hate these things for football players. I mean, Cam Akers is literally losing millions of dollars. It's an Achilles injury. It's heartbreaking. So, aside from the personal side of things and Cam Akers' life being affected, what are some effects this is going to have in the fantasy world?
Yeah, when we relate it back to fantasy, this is a big impact. A guy that was going in that second round, middle to early. Honestly, the hype train might have even taken him to the first round in some drafts. Now it's all about Darrell Henderson. There is talk of them signing a veteran running back to fill that void left by Cam Akers. But even if they sign a veteran guy, Darrell Henderson probably going to be fourth, fifth round pick by the time draft day comes around.
So, Henderson's ADP right now has him just after David Montgomery and just before CD Lamb. So, I'm getting my ADPs from the ESPN Top 300 PPR sheet. Kev, I believe you're using the same thing. That's what we're referencing for the rest of the podcast. I'm nervous with that ADP. When I look at the players around with that ADP, we have CeeDee Lamb, Adam Thielen, Deontay Johnson, Myles Gaskin, Julio Jones, okay? And then is right after Darrell Henderson. In my mind, I mean, I do you view Darrell Henderson as ADP as running back 21? Is that a good draft pick? Is that too high for you? Where do you think that is?
Yeah, much like the news that we heard yesterday and the news going forward before the season starts here, it's kind of a waiting game. You just have to compile that news, take new news, and build up your research as you go around. That's why it's important to, do your research early, build upon it as you go through. Right now, yes, it is a little high, but as the season comes closer, what veterans do they sign, if any? Is he moving up or down? And then make your decision as we get closer to these training camp dates.
You know, this I'm a huge fan of the draft theory of getting as many running backs as you can early. And what I mean by that is like the first two rounds going running back, running back. And the reason why is here is a great example. He's pick 39 right now, so that's the end of the third round, right? If you don't go, I'm sorry, that's into the fourth round. If you don't go running back, I mean, look at like I said, the wide receivers available around Darrell Henderson are just so much more appealing to me than the running backs around Darrell Henderson. So I think that's important to keep in mind whenever you are going through your draft. If you have that, beginning of the fifth, end of the fourth, and there's Darrell Henderson sitting right there, look at your draft sheet. I wouldn't be reaching for Darrell Henderson. The Rams scare me. Stafford has never had oh, that's not true. I'm sorry. Stafford has only ever had 1,000-yard rusher in his whole entire NFL career. I think they're just going to be gunslinging the ball out. I wouldn't touch Darrell Henderson. Let's move on to the next duo news. Two players start on the PUP list. That's Amari Cooper and the other one, Kevin, that I texted you that I am now forgetting because I didn't put it in my notes.
Amari Cooper and Saquon Barkley.
It's Saquon Barkley. Thank you, Kevin, for the save there. Kev, I talked last episode how I hate Saquon Barkley. I probably wouldn't draft Saquon Barkley in the first round. After this report, I'm probably not drafting Saquon Barkley at all. What are your thoughts?
I wouldn't take him off my draft board. Saquon Barkley is very appealing. I mean, he's the workhorse running back. He can come back. It's just something, again, you have to monitor here for the next month. See if there's any good headway of him returning to practice. Is he putting the pads on, a week before that first game? Just monitor it a little bit. Saquon Barkley still on my draft board. I'm not totally removing him, especially when I have the 3rd overall pick. I want a chance to get Saquon. It's not the end of the world when you lose week 1. If anything, it makes it more appealing for Saquon. You'll lose week 1, your first on waivers for week 1.
Yeah, but I don't think this is going to be something. Again, like Kevin said, you have to monitor it. Obviously, I'm saying I wouldn't draft Saquon Barkley today, which is July 22nd. You'll be listening to this July 23rd, hopefully. I'm saying I wouldn't draft him, but of course, if there's a report August 16th that states, Saquon Barkley's 100% participant in practice, no snap limit, obviously, I'm going to change my opinion. But the reason why I said I wouldn't draft Saquon Barkley right now, it's like Kevin, you said you have 3rd overall. Let's say you're picking 6th and Saquon Barkley's still on the board. Are you drafting Barkley or are you going to draft the Jonathan Taylor, a Kelsey, a Tyreek Hill? And in my mind, due to Barkley's huge question mark, I'm definitely not touching him in the 1st round because I would rather have somebody else I could draft in the 1st round with higher value and just not take that risk. Because with the Giants and their terrible offense, like at least looking offense, right? I'm not sure the ceiling is as high as like a Tyreek Hill or Austin Eckler or an Aaron Jones. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I guess it's just personal preference when it comes to me with Saquon Barkley. If he's there in the 7th or 8th pick in the 1st round, I would take that discount any day and pick him up. No brainer to me. I want that running back. I want that for sure number 1 guy when he does come back. I mean, he's injured then at the start of the season. If reports come out he's not playing week 1, fine. There's a timetable for his return. While all these other running backs, it's fantasy football. These guys get injured a lot. So at least I know my running back isn't starting week 1 or 2 and getting injured right away. Saquon's a guy that I know has a timetable to come back, and when he comes back, he's going to be a stud.
True. That's true. It is an Achilles injury. It's a big question mark how he's going to respond to that. But again, it's just personal preference. You have Kevin's side of you have my side of you. Do with that as you see fit. It's good that we disagree on this. I think we're going to disagree on this next player as well. Barkley started on the PUP list as well as did Amari Cooper. Kevin, I'm not as concerned as Amari Cooper starting the PUP list for a few reasons. My first reason is he didn't miss any time last year due to this injury. So Amari Cooper played. He didn't miss some time, but it wasn't anything dramatic like missing the whole entire season. So Amari Cooper played through this injury last year, so I'm not that concerned for it. And another issue that I'm not concerned is because and we probably could have talked about this with the Giants. The Giants, the Steelers, and the Cowboys all reported to training camp a week earlier than everybody else, right? So this could be, hey, Amari, your ankle's sore from last year or whatever it is. Like, we just don't want to hurt it again. Why don't you take this week off and then we'll bring you back in week 2? Like, you've been here for 4 years. You know what's going on in Dallas, right? And that's my thought process behind it. I'd like to hear your thought process.
Yeah, it's something for me. It's training day hype. It's training camp hype. Everybody's
Right.
getting excited. Football's right around the corner. You can smell it in the air. That week 1 Thursday night football matchup that we're all looking forward to. As soon as training camp starts, we're all looking at the news. What's going to happen with my team? Are we Super Bowl contenders? Somebody starting on this list and the first player, it's going to be the news. There's only 3 teams in training camp. People are dying to talk football. This is a non-factor for me. It doesn't move them at all. I'm drafting them today. I'm drafting them tomorrow. I'm not monitoring the situation at all either, because if there was a serious injury, it would be bigger news than what it is now. This is just day 1 hype.
That's another good point. Yeah, as I mentioned, it is July 22nd. People were reporting, so people just wanted to talk about it, right? So let's go ahead. Let's get into our AFC offseason recap. Much like last episode we did an NFC recap. If you didn't get a chance to listen to it, go ahead and tune back into our previous episode. This episode, we're doing an AFC offseason recap. Player movements, NFL drafts, impacts of fantasy that happen. So we're going to start with the AFC East. Kev, let's start with a team that has a lot of question marks coming in from this offseason. Let's start with the Miami Dolphins. They finished 10-6 last year. They had a good season by a lot of accounts. Their defense is incredible. I think they probably have a top 5 defense in the NFL. I think they'll get them a long way. And a good defense is always impactful to fantasy. So that's something to keep in mind. Another thing is their quarterback situation. In my mind, the Miami Dolphins will go as far as Tua Tagovailoa's left arm can take them. If he comes out and plays like he did at Alabama and does all those things, I think Tua and the Miami Dolphins offense in general for fantasy is a good fantasy football that I would like to have. Kev, what are your thoughts on the Dolphins? I think you and I are probably going to disagree on Tua. I'm a Bama grad, as I mentioned before. I love Tua. I went to school with Tua, so I'm pretty biased towards Tua. Kev, I'd like to have your unbiased thoughts.
If you ask me, the Miami Dolphins are the riskiest team in fantasy football this year. If you're going to categorize one team, Miami Dolphins, highest risk. Risk for me means very, very low ceiling, the bus, but it also means the very, very high ceilings, the players that can break out. We have people like Tua, for example. We've seen moments of just pure glory. We've also seen moments of pure disaster from Tua. It's a risky pick. That's kind of why I'd lean away from Tua and the wide receivers on this team. Kind of just lean away from the offense. I like to stay away from risk in fantasy football, but that's my take overall as a team for the Dolphins.
Yeah, I like that the riskiest team comment. I think I have a team we'll talk about later in the episode that I'll say is my riskiest team. But I don't disagree with a lot of things that you're saying. Just here's my counter arguments as why I'm not as worried about Tua. Is one, last year was a COVID year. So that means no offseason, no training camp, no anything like that for Tua because they weren't in person, right? They're all virtual. So Tua didn't really, as a rookie coming in the NFL, had to deal with all those COVID restrictions. Another thing is their offensive coordinator last year, Chan Gailey. That guy's such a clown. He's gone. He'll never have another NFL job ever again. Their offense was ranked like 32nd in a lot of efficiency statistics, which I'm not sure was all Tua's fault. I don't think there was really any talent there. I think the addition of Will Fuller and Jalen Waddle, I think those are two incredible wide receivers. Will Fuller has his injury history. I understand that. He's also suspended for week 1, which is big for fantasy impact because that means you won't be able to play him week 1. But outside of that, I would rather have the Dolphins offense than the Jets or the Pats in the AFC East for sure. I think they're probably a top half offense in the AFC that I would like to have. I think Myles Gaskins in PPR is very valuable as opposed to non-PPR. But I think that's enough about the Dolphins. We don't spend too much time talking about them. Let's move on to the New York Jets. The New York Jets are kind of an interesting team. And what I mean by interesting is they're the Jets and they're going to suck. And those two things are guaranteed, right? They drafted Zach Wilson. They brought in Tevin Coleman. They brought in Corey Davis. They drafted Elijah Moore in the NFL draft this year. They got a lot of new parts moving on the offense. Kev, initial thoughts?
Yeah, when it comes to the New York Jets, I believe I said this with the Detroit Lions last week. This is just an offense when it comes to fantasy football that I'm really not looking at. This is the only team that I'll mark off with the Detroit Lions of probably not drafting a single one of their players. They're going to have a lot of growing pains this year, a lot of young stars on this team. And I say stars because they do have that potential. There is a lot of talent on this roster. But we have so many guys and just so many washed up veterans. We have guys like Jamison Crowder, who I've put my faith in just one too many times. You know, we have the running backs. We have Tevin Coleman there. So we have washed up veterans, and then we also have the mix of just very, very young offensive players. I'm staying away from this offense.
Right. I agree with you from the standpoint of I wouldn't touch this offense. There's not a single player on this offense that I would touch, and I really mean that. I keep seeing all over Twitter and all over the World Wide Web, on the line, we can call it, that Michael Carter is generating a lot of hype. Here's a statistic I want to give you guys. I'm sorry, I want to give whoever tweeted this credit, but I can't remember. I'll find it and I'll put in the notes for the podcast. Here's a statistic for you. Of every single running back ever drafted in the 4th round, their rookie season, none of them have finished top 24. So that's a crazy stat. Because
if you're in 10-man league or under, it writes him off.
You just don't need him. There's no purpose. He's a rookie. You don't really know what's going to happen. You talked about Tevin Coleman. You talked about the crowded. We don't know what this offense is even going to look like. So if you're in a 10-man keeper league, much like us, we're in a 10-man half point PPR keeper league. I can maybe see if you're in round 17 and you already have a kicker and a defense, throw them on your roster. But even then, I would rather have like a handcuff to my running back one, or like that sophomore running back who's just waiting for that one injury. Like give me like Marlon Mack over Michael Carter every day of the week.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's go to the next team, the New England Patriots. Fantasy football offenses just die in New England, right? There's always the common joke is I'll never draft a running back out of New England, never draft a wide receiver out of New England. And Tom Brady and Gronk were the only players worth a damn on the New England Patriots. Well, unfortunately, Tom Brady's no longer there. He's winning Super Bowls in Tampa Bay, and he also brought his buddy Gronk along with him. We have a quarterback battle of Cam Newton and Mac Jones going on in New England. A tweet came out recently, Kevin. I saw it on the Sleeper app. I showed it with you. It was from the beat reporter over in New England. Damian Harris is the surefire, defined RB1 in New England. I mentioned before the running joke was you'll never draft a New England running back. Kevin, with this new report coming out saying Damian Harris is the surefire number one running back, what do you think about him?
Yeah, let's not get aboard that hype train right now. With Damian Harris, sure, he might be the running back, the guy who's actually going to carry the ball for him. But if we want to talk about who's been Mr. Consistent, the guy who is like a Julian Edelman, now that Julian Edelman's not there, this guy is going to be the new Mr. Consistent in New England, and that is James White, the guy who's always receiving. If you're in a PPR league, that's the guy that you want in the 10th, 11th, 12th round. That's the guy that you want right there from New England. When it comes to the quarterback, I think it's not really a battle. Cam Newton starting the season. If you want a decent quarterback or just a backup quarterback, I don't myself pick up a quarterback or backup. A guy that you can pick up off the waivers. Cam Newton will be your guy, but I think James White is the guy that you want on this offense.
I might disagree with you on that Cam Newton take. I don't think Cam Newton is that good. Hold on. Let's go back to this whole monitor thing. It's July 22nd. This reporter Damian Harris came out just because someone wants to talk about football, right? The New England Patriots haven't even reported a training camp yet, so who knows how real this report even is? So that's something to monitor. And just like that, I want you to monitor Mac Jones and Cam Newton, because if Mac Jones wins the starting spot, I'm all aboard the Damian Harris hype train. I think Damian Harris could be a high-end running back too from that standpoint, just because the amount of carries he's going to receive, and if they ever get in the goal line, he'll be the goal line back, right? And that's if Mac Jones wins it. If Cam Newton wins the starting job, and let's just say in this scenario, Cam Newton's the starter for 17 weeks, just to make it easy, right? If Cam Newton wins it, I think he's going to be it. I probably wouldn't roster Damian Harris. He doesn't catch the ball. He won't run for touchdowns. So next thing you know, Damian Harris is getting 15 carries for about 65 yards. So you're getting 6.5 points out of Damian Harris with like the upside of like 4 touchdowns that year. So if Cam Newton wins it, I'm not drafting Damian Harris. If Mac Jones wins it, I love Damian Harris. I'm all aboard the hype train. Let's talk about the wide receivers and tight ends in New England. They added a lot this offseason. They brought in Jonnu Smith, the super athletic, freakish tight end from Tennessee. They brought in Hunter Henry, the sure hand, big, beefy boy from Arkansas. He was on the LA Chargers. He came out to New England. And they also added Nelson Aguilar. So it was a widely known issue last year that New England had no weapons. Jacoby Myers went off last year. So that really talks about how bad they were, right? Kev, where are you ranking those options on the offense? Does the starting quarterback matter for those? I mean, obviously it does. Where would you rank them differently depending on Cam or Mac?
Yeah, if it's Mac Jones, I would be interested in the wide receivers. This would be a thing to look at week 1 or week 2 of the waiver wire and see where these Patriots wide receivers still are. I'm saying that because there is 4 guys who could take over that number 1 role easily.
Easily.
So
Agreed.
you would have to take a long shot in the draft, or if nobody selects one of these Patriots wide receivers, look to the waiver wire early in the season. That's where your answer will be to maybe fill a backup position on your roster.
Right. So to Kevin's point, Jacoby Myers and Nelson Aguilar are ranked back to back, right? They're ranked wide receiver 59 and wide receiver 60. I'm probably okay stashing one of those guys on my bench at this point. Hopefully, I've played the draft right. I have excellent wide receivers. Me, myself, I have DK Metcalf as a keeper in the 5th round. So if you're telling me come pick 133, one of those guys is on the board, and Mac Jones is the starter, I'll probably take a flyer on it there just for the high ceiling, right? Number one wide receiver is always a good thing to have in your team. Last team I want to talk about, the champions of the AFC East last year. They're unstoppable. Josh Allen was incredible. Nobody circles the wagons like this team, and it's the Buffalo Bills, ladies and gentlemen. Kev, what are your thoughts on the Buffalo Bills? Josh Allen, obviously a QB1. Is he better than Pat Mahomes? Where would you draft him in? Oh, okay. I know you don't draft QBs very highly, but if you did draft QBs very highly, where would you draft this QB?
I mean, first let's start off with the quarterback battle that's going to happen in minicamp at the Buffalo Bills. Mitch Trubisky and Josh Allen. Let's
True.
talk about
We
who's
we
going to win
can't
that starting job.
we can't forget to talk about Mitch. Think of the draft capital in that quarterback room. What was Josh Allen, the 7th overall pick, and then Mitch Trubisky was the 2nd overall pick? That is a talented quarterback room.
Absolutely. But this is finally an exciting team in this conference that a lot of players excite me when it comes to fantasy football. Josh Allen, obviously, very talented. He has the opportunity to maybe finish as a quarterback one again this year after finishing quarterback one last year. And then that brings up Stephon Diggs, obviously, the true number one wide receiver on this team. I think the number 2 wide receiver this year will probably be Emmanuel Sanders. If you have read the news lately, something that I'm actually buying into is Cole Beasley not happy with the NFL, doesn't seem too happy about playing for the Buffalo Bills. I wouldn't be surprised if Cole Beasley just retires with all the drama that he's stirring right now. So look for Emmanuel Sanders right before draft day to make a jump into that wide receiver 2. And I want Josh Allen's wide receiver 2 late in the draft.
Yeah, this team doesn't run the ball, right? I mean, they just don't. They throw the ball, and if they do run the ball, it's with Josh Allen. Do you think Gabriel Davis? He was a rookie last year. He didn't have crazy stats, but I mean, he had good enough stats that you might want to roster him. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, he was a rookie last year, and he ended the season with 600 receiving yards and 7 touchdowns. Do you think Emmanuel Sanders comes in and takes his job as wide receiver 2? Or do you think he has that sophomore year bump that everyone's always talking about?
I don't think he has a bump. And in terms of if you want value out of Gabriel Davis, this is not a guy that you should be drafting. Gabriel Davis is a late round stash, maybe last round pick, or again, a waiver wire pick. He didn't flash enough for most fantasy owners to know who Gabriel Davis is. He just didn't. He's not a big household name yet in the NFL. So use that as your value and use that against the people that you're drafting and playing with in fantasy football.
It's very true. I would rather have Emmanuel Sanders as well. Kev, let's just touch on the running backs on this team. Do you draft either one of them? There's Zach Moss and Devin Singletary. I probably don't draft either one of them and let somebody else go through the heartache of trying to figure out which is running back 1 in that team.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, Singletary last year averaged 4.4 yards a carry. Zach Moss, 4.3 yards a carry.
Right.
Singletary, 2 touchdowns. Zach Moss, 4 touchdowns. The touchdowns, they're more than likely going to go up this year. I mean, they just have to. Those are incredibly low numbers. But each of them rushing for just about 500, 600 yards, they don't excite me. If they're there in the 7th, 8th round and I'm looking for a backup quarterback or backup running back, I'll take them. But at their current ADP, I can't justify it.
I agree. I would let somebody else figure out that heartbreak. I just don't want to deal with that. Let's move to let's rank this division real quick, Kev. Obviously in the AFC East, I'm gonna start with the Buffalo Bills as my number 1 offense. I'm then gonna go Dolphins, New England Patriots, and then the New York Jets. Kev, what are your thoughts on those rankings?
Yeah, that's exactly my rankings for this division. Bills, I mean, every player excites me except probably the running backs in this. Then I'm going to the Dolphins again. I said it's the riskiest, but there is some upside there. It could be a high ceiling for the Dolphins offense this year. Then the Patriots, they have consistent players. but I don't see a higher ceiling than the Dolphins or Bills. Jets, I said I'm not. They come in fourth.
Agreed. I'm not touching the Jets, not touching hardly any of the Patriots or the Dolphins, touching all of the Bills except for the running backs. An exciting division. We're moving to a different one that people actually want to talk about. A lot of offseason news for this whole entire division in general. It's the AFC North. Kev, which team do you want to start with in the AFC North?
When it comes to the AFC North, I guess we can start with the Cincinnati Bengals. That's a lot of young players on that team.
Very young team. So a little recap what the Cincinnati Bengals had going on this offseason. They lost A.J. Green. That's a big loss in the wide receiver department, but not to fear because they drafted Ja'Marr Chase out of LSU with 5th overall. Other than that, Joe Burrow's come back healthy from his absolute complete knee reconstruction, right? I mean, he tore his PCL, his ACL, and his MCL. So there's that. Kev, with Ja'Marr Chase being added, the wide receiver room is T. Higgins, Ja'Marr Chase, and Tyler Boyd, right? Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins were incredible last year. They just both were, and they didn't have consistent quarterback play. The addition of the perceived ultra-talented Ja'Marr Chase and Joe Mixon being the running back there. How high are you on this offense?
I'm actually pretty high on this offense, probably a lot higher than most people. I would take the Bengals offense over the Steelers offense this year. We'll get to our rankings after we talk about each team. But when we talk about the Cincinnati Bengals, I think Joe Burrow is electric. I think he's awesome. I think he's fit for the NFL. Adding Ja'Marr Chase, the chemistry is already going to be there day one. I think Ja'Marr Chase, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins all have a chance to be fantasy relevant, at least in a flex position or a flyer route. If one of them does get injured and have to sit out a week, you want to start the other two wide receivers. I want T. Higgins. I'll take Ja'Marr Chase. I'll definitely take Tyler Boyd. Out of the three, I'd probably go with Tyler Boyd first. He just had more touchdowns last year. And then T. Higgins probably in second with Ja'Marr Chase in third. Joe Mixon, obviously injured, riddled last season. I don't know if he has great fantasy implications. I'll take the wide receivers, though, here.
Kev, this is good that we're doing this podcast. We have such differing opinions because I couldn't disagree with you any more than what you just said. I think Joe Mixon's going to have a great year this year. So hear me out. Joe Mixon, at his current ADP, is the only player on this team that I would draft. And here's why. So I got some hot takes. This is my hot take for the podcast. I don't think Cincinnati's offense is going to be any good because here's why. 99% of players in the NFL, I'm saying 99, that's an assumed percentage, but a ton of players in the NFL are superstars from the day they were born until the day that they die, right? Like all the superstars are, like OBJ, Julio Jones, these Tom Brady, all of these guys have dominated everywhere they went since Pop Warner till now, right? Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase did not. Joe Burrow, I understand that he was quarterback, Mr. Ohio quarterback, and all those accolades. I get that. He was only a 3-star quarterback, though, coming out of college. He went to Ohio State, couldn't win the position there, so he transferred to LSU, where he was terrible until the brilliant Joe Brady came in, and then him and Ja'Marr Chase just took off together. I don't know. Outside of that 1 year at LSU, none of these players have ever done anything. Ja'Marr Chase had 300 receiving yards in 12 starts his freshman season at LSU. Came in his sophomore season, had 1,800 receiving yards, and then didn't play. And now we're drafting him 5th overall. And look at his ADP. His ADP right now on ESPN is the 50th overall pick. It's around guys like Kenny Golladay, Cooper Kupp, Tyler Lockett, Juju Smith-Schuster, Courtland Sutton. Those are all 5 wide receivers I'm taking way before a rookie wide receiver who hasn't played in over a year. So there's that. And the only time he was good was for 12 games. And Ja'Marr Chase's whole entire career of football, he has been dominant for 12 games in a college setting when he was surrounded by Justin Jefferson and 5 other first-round draft picks, which, by the way, none of those other first-round draft picks really had a good rookie season, except for Joe. Burrow, but Joe Burrow's season was cut short by a horrific knee injury. They had to restructure his whole entire knee, and now we're drafting him insanely high. Like he's here. Let me pull it up real quick. Joe Burrow is courted right after Ryan Tannehill, and right before. Tell me how you're going to draft Joe Burrow in whatever offensive coordinator they have in Cincinnati over Matt Stafford and Sean McVay. Like, how are you doing that?
Joe Burrow. Over Matt Stafford. 800 receiving yards. AJ Green finished with 500. Those are numbers that I want to be a part of. I think this offense is really going to get moving. When it comes to Joe Mixon, I'm interested to see why you like him so much. In his career, the most rushing yards he's ever gotten is 1,100 yards in a season. That was the only season that he played 16 games out of 4 seasons. The most touchdowns he's gotten in a season is only 8, followed by 5, followed by 4. And in this pass-happy offense, when you have T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, and Tyler Boyd, and a young quarterback in Joe Burrow, I don't see how Joe Mixon is going to get more than 5 touchdowns this year and probably about 900 yards by the end of it.
So here's my thing with Joe Mixon. So last year, I'm throwing out. He started 6 games, irrelevant season, injury-ridden season. I think we can say that in whole for most of the Cincinnati players, right? Just kind of irrelevant. And so part of his is ADP, right? So his ADP, I like Joe Mixon's ADP a heck of a lot more than Jamar Chase's and a heck of a lot more than Joe Burrow. And another thing with Joe Mixon is, so you brought up the 2019 season where he had, what was it, like 1,100 yards and 5 touchdowns, right? He also led the NFL the second half of the years in carries that season, right? So they didn't use him for the first half. The second half came, he led the NFL in carries, and then he led the NFL in rushing yards for those second half of 9 games in 2019, right? So there's obviously this belief of Joe Mixon can get it done when we get him the ball a lot. I think because of Joe Burrow's knee injury, because there's no more experienced wide receivers in that room, right? I mean, Tyler Boyd.
Ross, the question is, where are you drafting Joe Mixon this year in fantasy football if you had the opportunity?
I would, it's middle to late second round. I can make an argument for drafting Joe Mixon over Antonio Gibson and Najee Harris, probably. I could probably sit down, put the pen to paper, and figure out that argument. We spent a lot of time talking about the Cincinnati Bengals, though. That's my hot take. Kev and I disagree on things. It's good that we disagree on things. Yeah, my opinion. You have Kev's opinion. We're moving on. Let's go to the Cleveland Browns. Let's make this one a little quicker, Kev. Not a lot of offseason changes for the Cleveland Browns. They got a solid run game. They got Baker Mayfield's Baker Mayfield. He's either going to win you a game or he's going to lose you a game, and you don't know what it's going to be. Kev, with Nick Chubb, when he did play last year, Nick Chubb was the most efficient running back in the NFL based off advanced analytics. Where would you draft Nick Chubb in a 10-man half-point PPR?
Nick Chubb is a late first-round pick, 9th or 10th for sure. This guy scored 12 touchdowns on the ground last year and splitting carries with Kareem Hunt. But Nick Chubb is better. He gets the goal line carries. This is the guy that you want in fantasy football. 9th or 10th pick of the first round. I would take him before guys like Austin Eckler.
So that's my question. So with Austin Eckler and his receiving ability, you would take Nick Chubb without. I mean, Nick Chubb doesn't catch the ball, right? I mean, last year in 2020, I mean that's not really a good sample size because he played 12 games. So last year in 12 games, Nick Chubb only caught the ball 16 times, right? That's nothing. So with Austin Eckler and his upside in the receiving game, you're going to pick Nick Chubb in a half-point PPR system over Austin Eckler?
Yep, I'm going to be picking Nick Chubb here.
Okay. And then OBJ, is he back? Would you put him on your roster at all? His current ADP, just for the listeners, is wide receiver 31, pick 59. Picks around him are Laviska Shenault, Chase Claypool, and T. Higgins, your boy. So are you drafting OBJ? Are you even putting him on your roster? Or are you just over that headache?
Yeah, if you like to be disappointed, you draft OBJ. But I am not going to.
I mean, I I love I think the talent of OBJ is there. Like you look at him on the field, he looks incredible. But mentally, I'm just not touching OBJ. Kareem Hunt, I think he's fine. He's a good handcuffed. His ADP's late enough that if you pick him and Nick Chubb gets hurt, he's a league winner all of a sudden. So I think that's enough for the Browns. Let's move on to Baltimore. Offseason changes, kind of a few for Baltimore this offseason. They added Sammy Watkins, the wide receiver from the Kansas City Chiefs. They drafted Bateman from the Minnesota Golden Gophers early in the NFL draft. They're obviously trying to get Lamar Jackson some more weapons. They re-signed Gus Edwards to a 3-year deal, which I think is pretty confusing. Kev, I know you're a keeper of J.K. Dobbins. Does the signing of Gus Edwards make you concerned at all?
Yeah, I mean, Gus Edwards is a great back. He definitely flashed in some moments last year. J.K. Dobbins, though, if we're talking about the Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt that we're just talking about here, that's how I look at J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards. J.K. Dobbins is the guy who's really, really efficient when they gave him the ball. He was unreal when he got the ball. He also gets the touchdowns. He's going to be the goal line guy. Gus Bus, he's going to be taking the back seat a little bit. But again, great handcuff and even maybe a viable flex play some weeks. In this offense, the way that they run the ball, they've been number one in running before recently with Lamar Jackson. Obviously, Lamar runs the ball, but he's going to run a little bit less when he wants to get paid. So Gus Edwards, J.K. Dobbins, a good 1-2 punch, but I like J.K. Dobbins better.
Here's my thing is that Lamar Jackson just doesn't throw to running backs, right? Why? And I don't blame Lamar Jackson. If I was Lamar Jackson, would I throw the ball 2 yards to my left and let him run 10 yards, or would I just want to run 10 yards? And if I'm Lamar Jackson, I'm a better athlete than everybody. So that being said, the receiving upside's not really there. I mean, for reference, J.K. Dobbins last year had 24 targets and Gus Edwards had 13 targets, right? So I mean that's not great. They both played 16 games last year. J.K. Dobbins had 134 attempts and Gus Edwards had 104 of 44 attempts. So I don't know. I don't know if I view. So I obviously think J.K. Dobbins is a more talented running back. But I'm not sure if Baltimore views J.K. Dobbins any different than Gus Edwards. I think they paid Gus Edwards a decent amount of money to come back. J.K. Dobbins is going to be a sophomore. It's going to be interesting. Do they want to use J.K. Dobbins like a workhorse running back? I think it's crazy that Baltimore doesn't throw to J.K. Dobbins, doesn't run with J.K. Dobbins 25 times a game because I just think he's that talented, but they don't. So I don't love the J.K. Dobbins or the Gus Edwards. I mean, J.K. Dobbins ADP, for instance, is okay. Hold on. It's running back 17. It's right after Miles Sanders and right before Chris Carson. In my mind, I'm taking Sanders and Chris Carson before J.K. Dobbins, especially with Gus Edwards there. And part of that is because Chris Carson and Miles Sanders don't have a Gus Edwards sitting behind him like J.K. Dobbins does. So that's just me. Mark Andrews is the tight end on that team. Mark Andrews had a great year. He's consistent. But unfortunately, with the tight end position, he's touchdown or bust, right? And Mark Andrews right now with his ADP, Kevin, based on ESPN, is tight end 4, pick 54. It's right after Juju Smith-Schuster, right before that string of quarterbacks going Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen. With Mark Andrews and his neediness of touchdowns, are you drafting him at that ADP, or are you just going to let him slide and try to address your tight end somewhere else in the draft?
I'm drafting my tight end elsewhere in the draft. When it comes to Mark Andrews, when it comes to the tight end position in general, you have Travis Kelce, who's on a league of his own. Then you have Darren Waller. You have George Kittle. And then after that, you have a little bit of a drop off again. And you have guys like Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews is boom or bust. Some weeks he'll be your savior. Other weeks he'll be your disappointment. That's not a guy that I want to put in my roster every week for a high draft pick.
Have ranked these 3 tight ends for me. They're 1, 2, 3 in ADP. in order. I'm sorry. It's 4, 5, 6. It's Mark Andrews at 4, T.J. Hawkinson at 5, and Kyle Pitts at tight end 6. Rank those tight ends for me 1, 2, 3, and your favorite.
I think Kyle Pitts first with the departure of Julio Jones. I really like Kyle Pitts in that offense. I mean, he's a rookie, but again, I think he can make an impact right away. TJ Hawkinson and Mark Andrews is a little bit closer than I'm thinking, just because I'm unsure with Jared Goff at the Lions. I'd
Right.
probably put TJ ahead of Mark Andrews just because TJ is the only guy the Lions have to throw the ball.
That's true. Yes, it's a true fact. But going back to our original rule, we're not touching the Detroit Lions offenses, so neither one of us are drafting him. Doesn't matter what pick we have. Last team I want to talk about in this division, Kev. We've been recording for 45 minutes. Let's pick it up a little bit. AFC North last team, Pittsburgh Steelers. Big addition this offseason is adding Najee Harris and getting a different offensive coordinator. I think the moon is the ceiling for Najee Harris. I think Najee Harris might touch the ball 30 times a game. Big Ben's 38 years old. He had a hurt elbow. I don't see the old gunslinging Big Ben being back. I think they're going to be under center a lot and hand the ball off to Najee Harris a lot. And that defense is so good. I think they can get away with having Najee Harris get 30 touches a game. Kev, what are your thoughts on the Pittsburgh Steelers defense?
On their defense,
I'm sorry,
it's
on their
pretty
offense.
good.
On
pretty good.
their defense is good. What do you
If
think
you're
about
in the
their offense?
IDP league, draft any player from this defense. But when we talk about the offense, Juju Smith-Schuster does not excite me as much as Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool, just because those two guys are on the up and coming when Juju, I think, is falling a little bit. Deontay Johnson gets the yards. Chase Claypool seems to get the touchdowns. They have a big draw there, had a big last year. Those are the two wide receivers I'd like. But again, like Ross said, they're not going to be throwing the ball again. We saw Ben Roethlisberger in his last few games, especially that playoff game against the Cleveland Browns, which was brutal. I think we're going to see a lot more games like that out of Big Ben this year. So I looked at Najee Harris. Do I think he's a second round pick? Borderline. It's probably a late second round pick. I would take him as the third overall pick in my draft. So in the second round, that'd be what, pick 17. I'd take him there.
I think I would rather have Najee Harris than Saquon Barkley. That's another hot take I have, especially with the news with the pup list for Saquon. But I'm very high on Najee Harris. I would rather have Najee Harris than any of the wide receivers in round 2 for sure. The running backs in round 2 of Nick Chubb, Antonio Gibson, Joe Mixon. Like I said, I think Joe Mixon's probably the best option there. But I mean, if Joe Mixon's gone and I'm getting Najee Harris at any point in the second round, I'm not upset with that. I think the moon is the ceiling for him. He's easily the most talented football player I've ever seen play football at the college level. And now he's going somewhere where they have a great defense and it's cold in those winter months. They're going to run the ball a lot. Kev, let's rank those offenses. You had the Bengals pretty high. How highly are you ranking those offenses together? You ranking Bengals number 1?
Yeah, no, when we come back to it and we're ranking fantasy in terms of that, I'm going to have to go actually the Cleveland Brown first. They got two running backs that are viable in fantasy, which is hard to do. They got wide receivers in Jarvis Landry. Odell, again, I said I probably wasn't going to draft him, but I would draft their quarterback, Baker Mayfield. So I'll take them at 1. I will take the Cincinnati Bengals at 2. Again, Joe Burrow, 3 probably playable wide receivers in fantasy football this year, followed by the Ravens, and then followed by the Pittsburgh Steelers coming in last.
Kev, we vary on this one. Nothing wrong with that. I'm probably for me the Browns. I don't think there's a player on the Browns that I really want outside of Nick Chubb. So I'm probably going to rank the Browns 4th. Give me Bengals 3rd. Give me Bengals 3rd, Steelers 2nd, and Baltimore 1st. I think Lamar Jackson is sexy as all get out. For fantasy football purposes, I think Lamar Jackson's incredible. So give me Baltimore as the best offense in the AFC North. Let's turn our direction to the AFC South. Kev, what team wants to start with the AFC South? I'll let you start this one off.
Yeah, when we go to the AFC South, this is another interesting division with a lot of changes. Let's go with the Colts, not the Baltimore Colts, but the Indianapolis Colts. Let's start there.
So here, let's trade places, Kev. So you be the host right now. I'll be the guy talking about it. The Indianapolis Colts. A lot of hype around Jonathan Taylor. Added Carson Wentz. Hilton's still there. The GM of the Indianapolis Colts is on the Pat McAfee show saying he believes Michael Pittman is a true wide receiver one in the NFL. Kev, I'm just going to start with Jonathan Taylor. He right now is ADP of 8. He's running back 7. Someone explain to me why a running back that got 7 of his 11 touchdowns in the final 3 weeks is running back 7. They got Nyheim Hines. Marlon Mack is coming back from an injury. Granted, he's got an Achilles injury, so who knows how he's going to respond. But the Colts re-signed him. So Marlon Mack was on the last year of his contract, blew out his Achilles, and then the Colts re-signed him. So I think that's kind of a telling tale that they're not really sold on Jonathan Taylor. His reception work isn't that high. He only had 36 receptions last year. Nyheim Hines is going to take all that from him. Kev, explain your thought process on Jonathan Taylor and Carson Wentz and how that offense is going to look.
Yeah, when it comes to Carson Wentz, the player that gets me the most excited with that quarterback change is actually probably the tight end position or one of these big wide receivers like Pittman. Carson Wentz, not really a deep ball guy, more of a dump off pass guy, loves the short passes and the tight ends and the running backs. But that brings up another point. Jonathan Taylor, those little dump off passes don't excite me as much as a Nyheim Hines or a Marlon Mack would. I think with 3 running backs, I think they're just going to ride the hot hand here. But people are drafting Jonathan Taylor in the first round. That is
And
crazy
high,
to me.
early in the first round, right? I mean,
Yep,
I've seen him go 4th in some of the mock drafts I'm doing, right? I
agreed.
just I can't see a world where so like you can make the argument that I'm making against Jonathan Taylor with Nyheim Hines and Marlon Mack for a lot of running backs, but like that high, you don't really want to have that argument, right? Like you're drafting Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, Barkley, Kamara, Henry, Elliott are all going off the board before Jonathan Taylor. And there's absolutely no competition there. Then give me, Eckler, Jones, and Chubb are the ones right after him. There's still only one running back there to take away carries from those guys. Jonathan Taylor has 2 running backs to worry about. I mean, if you were to draft Jonathan Taylor, where would you draft Jonathan Taylor? Would you still draft him in the first round?
No, I'd probably take him in the third.
Third. Wow. Wow. So I mean, if like I said, and so so Jonathan Taylor last year, statistically, if you look at his statistics, you see that he had 232 rushing attempts. He had 1,100 yards and 11 touchdowns, right? Those stats excite me a lot. But prior to week 10, Jonathan Taylor had one game with more than 20 touches. So for the first 10 weeks of the year, they really didn't use him, right? And then after week 10, he had 3 games of only 20 touches. So that's 50% of the time he's getting 20 touches. If I'm using a first round draft pick on a running back, I need him to get 20 touches every game, not 50% of the time, not 6 times out of 16 games. I need 100% of the time they're getting 20 touches, right? So, I mean, you said third round, and I kind of scoffed at it. But, some running backs being drafted in the third round. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, DeAndre Swift, J.K. Dobbins, Miles Sanders, right?
Right? Those are the guys I'd rather have.
I would rather have all of those players than Jonathan Taylor, the more that we talk about it. So maybe third round is pretty accurate. So good luck to people drafting Jonathan Taylor. That's the only thing that Kevin and I agreed on, which probably means Jonathan Taylor is going to be insane this year. But I digress. Let's move on to the absolute worst team in the NFL this upcoming season, the Houston Texans. Their offseason was a disaster. They didn't have a first round draft pick. Deshaun Watson wants out. Allegedly, Deshaun Watson had 19 girls file sexual assault charges against him allegedly. We got a lot of things going on there, Kev. Are you touching a single player on this Houston Texans team?
Yeah, I'd touch a player on this team here. Brandon Cooks, no matter who the quarterback is, you're going to want the wide receiver on this team because Randall Cobb is not stealing a lot of points there. And then with the departure of Will Fuller, I think Brandon Cooks is by far and away the greatest receiver on this team. He got 1,000 yards last year, 1,100 yards with 6 touchdowns, and Will Fuller left 8 touchdowns behind and 879 yards. If you just give 100 of those yards to Brandon Cooks, and let's say 4 touchdowns with the size of Brandon Cooks, you're looking at 10 touchdowns in a 1,200 season. So I'll take him. I'm also going to take a late flyer on one of these running backs. With this team just falling from behind, they're going to be having the ball a lot. I think teams are going to score within a minute on this defense. I'll take one of the running backs in David Johnson, Philip Lindsay, or Mark Ingram. Just give me one. I'll take a chance.
Which one would you rather have? I don't think I'm touching Mark Ingram. I don't think Mark Ingram makes it out of training camp, right? Philip Lindsay or David Johnson, I guess, is the question then, Kev.
I'd probably take Philip Lindsay,
Yeah,
the younger back.
yeah, but I mean, he's not like that much younger. I mean, David Johnson is only hold on, I'm Googling his age right now. David Johnson is only 29 years old, right? So he's not like over the hill yet. I mean, I don't know. I'm not
He's
sure.
almost at that. He's almost at that 30 mark for a running back.
Yeah, but Philip Lindsay turns 27 tomorrow. Happy birthday, Philip Lindsay. So it's not like David Johnson's 3 or 4 years older than Philip Lindsay. Philip Lindsay was an undrafted free agent and had one good season, then another terrible season. So I don't know. I'm probably not super high on Philip Lindsay. David Johnson was a solid running back last year. I think everything depends on what's going on with Deshaun Watson. If Deshaun Watson doesn't play for this team because he's angry and all these sexual assault things and everything going on, I don't think there's a player that I really want on this team. Brandon Cooks is interesting. I mean, Brandon Cooks has had 1,000 yards receiving in every single year in his NFL career, except for his rookie season and except for one season on the LA Rams where he was hurt for a lot of it. So I don't hate the Brandon Cooks call out. His ADP doesn't really scare me. That's an interesting flyer. Let's move on. Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't really want to spend a lot of time talking on the Jacksonville Jaguars just because I don't think they're really a fantasy relevant team. They added Trevor Lawrence this offseason. They added Travis Etienne this offseason. Trevor Lawrence is supposed to be out of this world talented. He's the first overall quarterback. They're drawing comparisons to Andrew Luck. Kev, are you drafting anyone on the Jacksonville Jaguars team? What do you think about it?
I mean, quarterbacks, you don't need to pay for. Again, I said it time and time again, especially rookies, though. This is not a guy that I'm looking at if you're not in a keeper or dynasty league. When it comes to the running back, that was the most puzzling move across the NFL this year, I think, is drafting the running back from Clemson when they already have James Robinson. I think both of their running styles, or I guess I should say size, is about the same. One's not, that workhorse punching the ball at the goal line kind of guy. So that's confusing. Maybe pick one of those guys up in the middle, late rounds. But again, they're going way higher than that. I wouldn't waste my time too much there. When it comes to wide receivers, I might take a flyer on DJ Chark, but that's the only wide receiver I'd be touching here.
Yeah, I want of the Jacksonville Jaguars wide receivers, I want whatever wide receiver is Trevor Lawrence's favorite target. And I think that's got a real shot to be Laviska Shenault. So I agree with that. I would rather have Laviska Shenault than any other team or than any other wide receiver on the Jacksonville Jaguars. Here's my thought process behind the James Robinson and Travis Etienne. I think they're more like a lightning and thunder kind of situation going on. And also, I bet that the Jacksonville Jaguars don't view James Robinson as that big of a value. He was an undrafted free agent, which means that he's just available to go pluck up at any point, right? As well as I bet the Jacksonville Jaguars think they're going to be down a lot and they'll be passing to the running back a lot. And then boom, there's Travis Etienne. Here's a fun fact I have for you guys about James Robinson last year. So this is based off of the fantasy football rankings from ESPN. Last year, through week 7, James Robinson was running back 6, right? So top 10 running back. Kev, outside of that, how many rookies were in a top 10 position before week 7? So what rookie was top 10 in their position before week 7?
I'm not sure.
It was no rookies. James Robinson didn't reach top 10 till week 7, right? And no other rookie was in the top 10 for their position. Why does that matter? because come week 17, when playoffs are ending, Antonio Gibson, Cam Akers, James Robinson, Justin Jefferson, all of these guys were huge values for their team, but they were rookies. Rookies take some time, especially rookie running backs, right? So there's those occasional Zekes and Najee's taken, things like that. But Javonte Williams might not be good until week 8. If you're drafting these guys, it doesn't matter what their ADPs are. If you're drafting them and they're rookies, hold on to them for a few extra weeks unless it's painfully obvious that they're not being drafted high, right? Or they're not being used, right? Like Antonio Gibson last year, he was drafted in the 9th round. Antonio Gibson ended the year with 12 rushing yards and 1,000 rushing, or 12 rushing touchdowns and 1,000 rushing yards. So just give me those running backs or those wide receivers that are effective later in the season, but they're rookies, so they just take some time. Those are huge keeper values. You can take a run at some rookies in the 8th, 9th round. Would you rather have Marvin Jones on the Jacksonville Jaguars or, Javonte Williams, the running back for the Denver Broncos? These are some of the decisions you have to make. In weeks 1 through 8, as a fantasy player, you might really like Marvin Jones. But I guarantee you, weeks 9 through 15, Marvin Jones are not playing. And Travis Etienne might see the field. Who knows what's going to happen with that rookie running back. So that's just things like that. Things to keep in mind of. Look at trends and stats from previous seasons as to when players really took over. And rookies don't take over till end of the year. Last team in the NFC South, or the AFC South, I apologize, is the Tennessee Titans. Ton of movement in the coaching world for the Tennessee Titans. They lost their offensive coordinator, Arthur Smith. He's going to the Atlanta Falcons, rise up. And they're promoting Todd Downing, their tight ends coach, to be the new offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. They've also added Julio Jones. Julio Jones is a superstar wide receiver. They only needed to trade a second-round pick for him. I'm not bitter. It's fine. And they also lost Jonnu Smith. Kev, what are your initial thoughts of this Tennessee Titans offense?
Yeah, well, when it comes to this offense, I like the move of Tennessee getting Julio, but I think Julio's pretty washed up. Not a great wide receiver for fantasy this year. I'll take A.J. Brown, maybe take, the tight end in the ADP. I wouldn't take, obviously, the tight end over Julio Jones, but I like him as his ADP. Julio Jones is going too high for me. Give me A.J. Brown, who's the for sure fire wide receiver 1, has that, rapport built up with Ryan Tannehill. And, of course, Derrick Henry, workhorse, probably going to rush for another 2,000 yards this year.
Do you think Derrick Henry is like everyone's always talking about? Derrick Henry can't be run this much. He's going to get hurt eventually. He can't be run this much, but he always does, right? So last year, Derrick Henry had 378 rush attempts. And I'm going for running backs who are getting like 220 rushing attempts, and I'm happy with that, right? I talked about how I'd like to have Damian Harris on my roster or J.K. Dobbins on my roster. J.K. Dobbins had 143 carries last year, and now we're comparing that to Derrick Henry to 378. So do you think with the addition of Julio Jones, there's a world where that 378 turns into 300 or something like, just something more reasonable, coming back down to earth a little bit more? Or do you still think they're just going to run the ball until these wheels fall off? And if they might never fall off.
It's definitely going to go down this year, even with the added game. I think the attempts are going down. That's why they added Julio Jones there.
Right.
They can pass the ball a little bit more, open up the field. I mean, Derrick Henry averaged 5.4 yards a carry last season. I think that even goes up, but attempts are going to go down. Touchdowns might go up as well. I'm looking for a big year out of Derrick Henry. But yeah, don't expect him to get fed the ball like he did last year, because that's just not healthy for any player to get the ball that much.
Right. And that 378 did not include the playoffs, for reference. So granted, the playoffs, the Tennessee Titans only played one game, so it doesn't really matter. But still, 378 is just an astronomical number. I think on paper, the Tennessee Titans offense is great. I got hesitations though. So I mentioned they're promoting Todd Downing to offensive coordinator. The last time we saw Todd Downing as an offensive coordinator was the 2017 Oakland Raiders. And if you remember, 2016 Oakland Raiders, they were incredible. Derek Carr was an MVP finalist. They made it to the playoffs. They had 2 1,000-yard wide receivers in Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree. Their defense was bad, but it didn't really matter because their offense on paper was supposed to be good enough. Here are some of their NFL ranks. In rushing yards, they were 25th. In passing yards, they were 16th. In total yards per play, they were 13th. And in total yards, they were 17th in NFL ranks. If you compare the 2017 Oakland Raiders roster to the 2021 Tennessee Titans, it's really not that. It's not that different. Derek Carr just came off his incredible season. Ryan Tannehill just came off an incredible season. Derrick Henry was the workhorse running back. The Oakland Raiders on this time had Marshawn Lynch when he was still killing it. Marshawn Lynch was a 1,000-yard rusher that year, right? So he was still great. The 2 wide receivers, Julio Jones and A.J. Brown, that's kind of equivalent to Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper. I don't know. If you look at these players in this offense then, they weren't fantasy relevant. You didn't want these players on your roster. They were down years for all of them. And that was Todd Downing calling all of the plays, right? He was calling the shots. And now we're just completely disregarding that because he has Derrick Henry, Julio Jones, and A.J. Brown. Well, the Oakland Raiders might have discarded that back in 2017, and they went 6-10 because of it. So I don't know. I just have my hesitations. Whenever you lose an important player like Jonnu Smith, and I understand you add Julio Jones, on paper, that makes sense. But if your offensive coordinator can't draw up a good offensive scheme, you can have the best players in the world, and it doesn't matter just because they're not good. So I'm concerned by that. The fact that they're promoting a coach that lost his best player in free agency to call plays now is kind of crazy to me. I don't really get how the NFL works with the coaching staff, but I digress. We'll see how the Tennessee Titans do. Kev, let's rank the AFC South offenses from first to last. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I'm going with the Titans first. Again, AJ Brown, Derrick Henry, Ryan Tannehill, all guys on my fantasy team. Then I'm going over to the Indianapolis Colts with Carson Wentz. I will take Jonathan Taylor. I think he's going to have a decent year, but just not at that ADP. Going with
third
Jackson.
Round. Let's make sure that's clear. We're taking Jonathan Taylor if he's available in the third round.
And then I'll follow that up with Jacksonville. A lot of young rookies, exciting, promising. Texans don't have anything promising. I'll put them in last.
Right. So my rankings don't differ. I just said all those things about the Tennessee Titans. I still like their offense, though. I'm the biggest Julio Jones fans in the whole entire world. Colts, I think the Carson Wentz is just such a big question mark. I'm not thrilled with any of these offenses, but you're forcing me to rank them, so I'm ranking them. And then I'll do Jacksonville. I'll take a flyer on Travis Etienne. Do you know the last time a running back was taken in the first round? Okay, let me restart this. In the past 10 NFL drafts, of all the rookies taken in the first round, running backs, only one of them didn't finish top 10, and that was Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year, and he missed a lot of games. So, Travis Etienne, running backs in the first round, they have a history being used and used a lot. So I think that's interesting. Last division, I think that this division's pretty straightforward. AFC West. Kev, let's start with the team that went to the Super Bowl last year. Let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs. What do you think about the Kansas City Chiefs?
Who on this team do you not want?
Exactly, right?
Patrick Mahomes, quarterback 1, maybe competing with Josh Allen. You got Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who I think is going to have a bounce back year again. Injury, a little prone last year. I think he's got a huge ceiling to go. Then we have Tyreek Hill, Mecole Hardman, even as wide receiver 2 on this team I want, especially at his ADP. I think he's getting drafted way later than he should when Patrick Mahomes is throwing the ball. And then, of course, the guy who's surefire, number 1 at his position, we have Harrison Butker at kicker. No, I'm just kidding. That would be Travis Kelce at tight end.
Kev, how high is too high to draft Travis Kelce?
I would say,
and for the record, let's say half point 10-man PPR.
I would say first 5 picks is too early. Anything after that, more than acceptable.
I'm probably going only first and second. I would go third. The only running backs I would take over Travis Kelce is Christian McCaffrey, Dalvin Cook, and Alvin Kamara. I would rather have Travis Kelce over
Alvin Kamara there.
I would take Alvin Kamara over Travis Kelce. I really would.
What about Derrick Henry then? I'm saying.
I think you and I just had a 5-minute conversation about a lot of negatives that can come Derrick Henry's way.
Okay.
So I don't have a lot of negatives coming Travis Kelce's way. I have a lot of negatives coming Derrick Henry's way. And don't get me wrong, I love Derrick Henry. I love Zeke. Those are the running backs I would draft after Travis Kelce. But like, if it was Travis Kelce or Zeke, I would probably take Travis Kelce because then in that second round, if I'm picking fourth, let's say, in that second round, I can then get maybe Joe Mixon and Travis Kelce on the same fantasy football team. I should have picked fourth. Am I right? Let's switch up gears. Let's go to a different team. I love the Chiefs. There's not a player I don't want on this team. Let's switch it to a team that we probably feel the exact opposite way about with the Las Vegas Raiders. Movement this offseason. They've lost their best tackle. They lost their best center. And they added Kenyon Drake for receiving purposes. And I put that in quotations because that's what Kenyon Drake states is going to be his role. He said that on NFL Good Morning today. He thinks he's going to come in and has a more receiving role. Kev, what do you think of this Oakland Raiders team?
Yeah, when it comes to this team, Darren Waller, guy that you probably want on this offense. I honestly don't doubt that Kenyon Drake's going to come here and catch some passes. Josh Jacobs kind of isn't the running back that we all thought he was going to be, especially after last year.
I'm not sure that's fair. I'm not sure that's fair. What do you mean?
I mean, with the 3.8 average yards per carry and the
sure.
offensive lines coming down, I just would rather have Kenyon Drake throw the ball, catch those little dump off passes to take pressure off Derek Carr, so then they can throw the deep ball and use Henry Ruggs a little bit more. So I'll take Kenyon Drake, honestly, over Josh Jacobs at current ADP.
Yeah, so here's my huge question mark with Kenyon Drake, stomping his feet and saying, I'm coming in as a receiving back. When in his career has he really excelled at being a receiving running back? Like, he's never really done it. He had 1 year in 2018 where he had 50 receptions. But guys like Zeke and Barkley and, Kamara are going to have way more than 50 receptions, right? And that was Kenyon Drake's role in Miami. So I'm not really sure we've seen in the past Kenyon Drake do this receiving work that he claims that he's coming in to do. Like, for reference, Kenyon Drake only had 25 receptions last year, and Josh Jacobs had 33. So last year, Josh Jacobs had more receptions than Kenyon Drake, and now Kenyon Drake is going to come in and be the receiving running back. That confuses me. I think the what you said about Josh Jacobs for the most part was accurate. I don't think that jab he took at him of being not what we expected was fair. But I mean, he's had 1,000 yards, rushing yards 2 years in a row, right? That's really hard to do. And he had 12 rushing touchdowns last year, right? But as I mentioned, he just doesn't get a lot of receptions. He's a one-dimensional running back. Kev, his ADP right now is late third round, right? So running backs being drafted around him, David Montgomery, Darrell Henderson. Are you taking David Montgomery and Darrell Henderson over Josh Jacobs with the addition of Kenyon Drake and everything?
Well, yeah, Darrell Henderson I'd take way above that. I mean, his ADP is just going to go up. But David Montgomery, I'm drafting before him as well. Yep.
I don't know. Well, every argument I have against David Montgomery, I also have against Josh Jacobs. I'm not sure that's a fair argument. So, give me a coin flip on that one. But I'm not sold on Darrell Henderson being the sole running back. But like we said, let's monitor it for the next month. Let's see what happens on the LA Rams. If the Rams don't add anybody, give me Darrell Henderson in the top of the third, right? But if they add somebody, let's not go too crazy in his ADP. There could be some issues. And the O-line being terrible is, a concern for me. Let's keep moving on. Let's finish up this podcast. Denver Broncos, the Mile High team, added Javonte Williams in the NFL draft this year, second round pick out of North Carolina. They brought in Teddy Bridgewater to compete with Drew Lock for quarterback one position. Kev, initial thoughts on the Denver Broncos?
Yeah, something that really sticks out to me is that Javonte Williams, he doesn't excite me in the offense, I don't think, in the same way that he does a lot of people. The hype train's just going to keep on going all the way to draft day, all the way to end of August, early September. With him there, you got to remember that Melvin Gordon's there. Again, not a great running back, but somebody who's definitely going to get some time in that offense. And with guys like Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock, nobody's going to be afraid of the Broncos throwing the ball on them. They're going to play the run. They're going to stack the box against an average rookie and an average veteran player. So I'm not too excited. The only player that probably excites me here is Cortland Sutton. Had a great season last year. I expect him to continue that.
You don't mean Sutton. Sutton got hurt last year. Didn't play last year. Do you mean Judy?
Yeah, Jerry Jeudy.
Okay, yeah. I So here's my thing about Javonte Williams. I understand why they took him in the second round. I think they have a decent enough offensive line, but kind of like you said, they still have Melvin Gordon, but they only have Melvin Gordon on one more year, right? So next year it's going to be Javonte Williams' team if he looks good in the NFL. So I think there's some value for keeper purposes. Take Javonte Williams at his current. So Javonte Williams' current ADP is running back 26. So he's drafted right before Mike Davis and right after Kareem Hunt. So that ADP is not too high. It's pick 75. So you're right in the middle of the 7th round. If I'm drafting 8th round, 9th round, Javonte Williams is somehow still there, I'm taking him. He seems like an Antonio Gibson from last year to me. I think the team they trade up to draft him in the 2nd round. They like him. There's good reports coming out. Beat writers are reporting saying, I don't know how Javonte Williams isn't the running back one. But again, Melvin Gordon's still there. Their passing offense doesn't scare me that much. Their tight end, though, he's a pretty big question mark for me, Kev. What do you think about Noah Fant? Noah Fant got hurt last year, so not really sure that we could use last year's statistics as a huge barometer. But just for reference, he had 93 targets last year, 62 receptions, and almost 700 receiving yards. So, what do you
I was
think about
talking
him?
about Jerry Jeudy having that good year last year, and then now we have Sutton coming back. Again, we said that passing offense in either of those quarterbacks is not really exciting. I think he takes a step back this year. I think he's pretty overvalued at his current position.
So is this Jerry Jeudy or Noah Fant?
Noah Fant.
Got it. So some tight ends being drafted around Noah Fant is Robert Tonyan and Mike Gesicki, Jonnu Smith. So that's they're all back to back to back to back, right? In ADP, they're all picks 106 through 109. So I think that the rest of the NFL community is kind of saying, take your pick of these irrelevant tight ends. If you don't have a tight end yet, by round 10, take one of these guys. Hope it works out. But I'm not overly excited about Noah Fant. This offense feels like it's built so there's all these rumors that they could have added Aaron Rodgers. If they added Aaron Rodgers, it's probably the number one offense in the NFL, right? They just have so many weapons everywhere. But unfortunately, they have Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater throwing the football. So it's not I don't really care. It's kind of what it comes down to. Last team, LA Chargers, Justin Herbert. Wow, how are you? What a rookie year. What do you think about this team? How high is Justin Herbert for you? Do you think he's a difference maker like everyone else is saying that he is? Or what's going on there?
Yeah, top 10 quarterback here in Justin Herbert this year for fantasy football. That also means Keenan Allen, big year coming his way. You should also look at Joshua Palmer, the rookie coming to the Chargers. I think Mike Williams has had his chance as a Charger. So I'm going to look at that rookie, maybe a late end steal, especially if you're in dynasty format. We have Jared Cook coming back as tight end for the Chargers. Jared Cook has made his rounds in the NFL. Again, maybe a good veteran position for Justin Herbert here. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jared Cook has a weekend where he scores 2 touchdowns, 80 yards. Look out for that position. The person that I'm down on that seems that a lot of people are high. You know where I'm going with this. Austin Eckler, too high on a lot of people's draft boards. I like that he is a pass catching back, has a lot of movement on this offense. But again, Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly, and they actually drafted a rookie running back here. It's very crowded. They could run a lot of these guys. I don't think Austin Eckler is crazy talented. He just runs in this offense. All these guys can run the same way in this offense. It's an exciting offense, but I don't think Austin Eckler's there for me.
So Austin Eckler, he's curious for me. I feel like every day I flip on if I really like Austin Eckler or I really hate Austin Eckler. At time of this recording, I kind of like Austin Eckler a lot. Like you said, It's a crowded running back room. They had Joshua Kelly last year. Who was the other running back they had last year? You said his name. I'm forgetting.
Joshua Kelly.
And then what was the other one?
And they drafted a rookie.
Right, but I don't know. Like Joshua Kelly was so bad, and whenever Austin Eckler, he played 10 games last year, and he finished with 500 rushing yards and 400 receiving yards. That's 900 yards in 10 games, right? So it's a 17-game season now. That's what, 15 total yards? 1,500 total yards? I mean, I don't know. I kind of like that, right? I mean, just rough numbers off my head. I like the thought of that. I think this offensive line is probably the most improved offensive line. They're replacing 4 starters. But they're adding them well, right? They're drafting the tackle out of Northwestern. They're adding the center out of Green Bay, and they're adding a couple other guys. So, I mean, if you tell me Justin Herbert gets one more year, the offensive line is improved, and you're going to tell me that Austin Eckler, who in 10 games had 54 receptions and in 17 games is now going to have like 80 to 90 receptions, I want that running back on my team, right? And I understand what you're saying. It's crowded, but whenever, Austin Eckler was healthy last year, he was getting the touches, right? I mean, like I said, if I'm drafting a running back early in the first round, I want him to get 20 touches every single game. And guess what? Austin Eckler was one of those guys that was getting 20 touches every single game, whether it was through receiving, which has more value in a half-point PPR or full PPR, or rushing the ball. So I can make the argument for Austin Eckler. So you said you're down on him. Where would you draft Austin Eckler?
Late second.
Okay. Would you draft Najee Harris or Austin Eckler?
Najee Harris.
Would you draft Joe Mixon or Austin Eckler?
Austin Eckler.
Phew. I might take Austin Eckler over both those guys, but I digress. Last team that we just covered for the AFC West. Kev, let's rank the AFC West. First offense to worst offense. I'm gonna go first. Give me the Chiefs. Give me the Chargers. Give me the Broncos. Give me the Raiders. What are your thoughts?
Amen.
All right, cool. That was easy, guys. That was it. Kev, is there anything else you want to go over? Or are we good?
Nope, that seals the deal.
Ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you guys for listening. Thank you for listening to the second edition to the second edition of the Davis Duo Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the guys that go for 2 Sports Network. If you have questions, comments, concerns, you just want to complain about Kevin, text us, tweet us, snap us, and comment on our webpage. You'll be able to listen to this podcast wherever you listen to your podcast currently, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, a couple other places. We love it. Spread the word to your friends. Thanks for coming. Appreciate you guys. Everyone have a great day. 44 days till D-Day, Kev. Let's have a great 43 days, and I'll see you in 44.